The purpose of Visions from the beginning was to help people see that differences matter, that there's a way in which being able to understand cultural differences and also the context of people's lives outside of work and their values and the way in which they approach work was going to be essential to not just the survival and retention of those workers, but also to their being able to thrive. And that meant being able to successfully contribute to whatever the organization was and have the opportunity for advancement. After we assessed how the organization already looked at the diversity that was present, which might mean diversity of class background or diversity of age or diversity of gender. Many organizations had done more thinking about that than about race. And then we would work with all of those variables as a way of providing both the kind of conceptual framework and the training to successfully manage people in the workplace and to think differently about maybe some of the way in which the work was done. Many organizations are service providers to communities of color, for example, or poor communities. And they assumed that if there was diversity in their workforce, that would be enough to translate into effective work across those differences. And what we've learned over time is that the presence of difference itself is not enough. That in fact, it's very important to take into account that very different ways of being valued, being utilized effectively in the workforce, etc., means being attuned to those differences, to those cultural differences. And that's what inclusion starts to get at. It's not just providing a welcoming environment, it's about being able to see the true value of differences in the way in which the work community happens. So it's an internal process and also the way in which an organization might provide its services. And then equity is really about understanding that there's a historical impact to the ways in which this country has treated people differently on the basis of their group membership in these variables. And that historical marginalization has meant that many people come to work or live in communities where they have very different needs than what might be assumed by more privileged or white-based organizations. And so really understanding the principles of equity mean that we encourage the people that we work with and we teach them how to use a lens that informs the way in which they think about the work that they're doing, that takes into account those historical disadvantages and the ways in which people's needs are different. And what they've really learned is that most effective service and giving happens more in partnership, and it happens with a community-driven set of objectives and goals. And so the skill set that people needed from in those organizations was how to listen differently, how to process that information through the lens of equity and inclusion, how to make sure that some of their practices that were, kind of the way they've always done things could be more flexible and accommodating to really meet organizations where they were at or meet communities where they were at. And that's oftentimes been a big part of our work. When people genuinely feel like they have a way to push themselves, to take more risks, to be more open, to challenge themselves around some of what is now called implicit bias, to really think about their role as change agents in their organizations, that all of that is something that is deeply personal, even though a lot of the work that we've been doing is focused on the workplace. I think that people oftentimes know that there was a resurfacing of really explicitly racist attitudes and behaviors. And I think many organizations were caught off guard about how profoundly they had assumed that things had gotten better. And that is, I think, what the last 5-6 years have been about, is encouraging organizations. So I'm assuming people in Class Act still have contacts, whether they're on boards or whether they are still working, to be able to think about where is our organization in the progression towards actually thinking about our work through the lens of inclusion and equity. What are the skills that we need to be more effective about this? How can we build a different kind of community, both inside our organization or on our board? How do we steward this within the organizations where we have power? And so asking that question, and asking at a personal level, what would I need to feel more effective in managing discussions about race, or participating fully in the learning of everyone in my organization? Because oftentimes it's the leaders of organizations modeling their new behaviors and their new understandings that is the most impactful.